You dealt me another hand, heartaches that I played.
Mr. Mark J. Smaha is a licensed athletic trainer who resides in Paulsville, Washington. An internationally known athletic trainer with over 50 years of experience in sports medicine, Smaha retired from Washington State University as Director of Athletic Medicine, a position he held for 21 years, and began working at the Paulsville Athletic Club, where he has been employed for the last 17 years. He served as the president of the National Athletic Trainers Association. His profession on numerous occasions has honored Mark, receiving the Most Distinguished Athletic Trainer Award and induction into the National Athletic Trainers Hall of Fame, the Northwest Athletic Trainers Hall of Fame, the Marshall University Sports Medicine Hall of Fame, the Iowa State NATA Hall of Fame, and the Washington State Athletic Trainers Association Hall of Fame. In June 2016, he was awarded the Eve Becker Leadership Award. This award is the highest leadership award presented to an individual whose leadership spans over 40 years in dedication and service to the NATA and the profession of athletic training. Enjoy.
Good morning. Like everybody out there, we all got up this morning and we all put our clothes on to get out and go about. But it's a whole lot different world, isn't it? You guys have been robbed. You've been robbed of your relationships. And as far as developing those, you've been robbed of school. You've been robbed of being around people, which is really the most important thing to our existence. And we're in a pandemic, and it's a whole lot different. And I got to thinking this morning, when I was thinking of you and the turmoil that you're going with, not being able to play sports, have a prom, whatever it is to how do you manage through that? And I got to think, when I was a kid, first of all, I'm a farm boy from Iowa. I was raised on a very small Iowa farm. But we raised 200 chickens, 60 head of cattle, and 700 hogs a year. I did a lot of scooping of a lot of stuff when I was a kid, and that wasn't much fun. But that was my environment. I had an older brother who used to pound on me all the time because he was bigger. I had a mom and dad who were wonderful, hardworking, never fought. I had a great upbringing, really. Now, at the time, I really didn't think it was that great an upbringing, but that's the only thing I knew. You see, we didn't have social media. We did have TV. I know that's probably hard to believe, but we did have TV, but we didn't have the social media available to you. And when I was on the farm, I didn't have any relationships around. They were all 10 miles away. So me getting to interact with kids, it didn't happen a whole lot. So you had to be creative about, what you were doing and how you're going to play and play by yourself. My favorite subject in school was recess. And then, of course, the hallways with the chicks. That was pretty high up on my plate, too. And then we didn't have kindergarten. It wasn't invented yet. Go figure. So, again, I was pretty isolated at home. And my brother went to school, obviously, before me. So I had to stay home. It was so boring. I had to figure out ways to be creative. Well, for instance, just as an example, when I was in second grade, I was watching this Disney movie and it was Jiminy the Cricket, who was a little cricket that jumped off a ledge singing "Wish Upon a Star" with a little umbrella floating down. And I thought, that looks like fun. I bet you know where this is going, don't you? So the next morning, I got my mom's umbrella and I went out and I climbed up on a haystack. It was about 20 feet high, and I jumped off. I suffered significant deceleration trauma. In other words, I came to a very abrupt stop on my face in a feed bunk, and I was unconscious for 8 hours. My brother found me, carried me to the house, totally unconscious. I was out for 8 hours. And they laid me on the bed. Mom called the doc, and the doc said, let him sleep it off and bring him in when he comes to. I guess that's the way they did things back then. Certainly wouldn't be that way today. Anyway, so growing up on the farm was a little bit of a challenge. I got hurt a lot. I was always jumping on. Thought I could fly. My cape didn't work. And so again, a lot of deceleration trauma. Fortunately, I was smart enough to put a mattress down on the ground, so it wasn't all that bad a landing. But I did get hurt a lot. And one day, my dad's coming home from the field. I'm about 6 years old, and I'm playing with my brothers that happened to come over, my brother and my cousins. And since I was the smallest guy, I got hurt the easiest. So I got stepped on or something. My dad gets off the tractor and he comes over to me and he says, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "Well, I'm hurt." And I was crying. He says, "Look, you want to play sports? I want you to play sports, but you got to be tough. Life's hard. You got to suck it up. You move on. You can't cry. Real men don't cry." Well, I took that to heart. And I became tougher just because my dad told me that I needed to. And just as an example of that, we would take our cattle to Chicago every summer in June, and all 60 head of them to sell. And we'd go and see the White Sox and Cubs play. And that was really exciting. I mean, you can imagine if I didn't have anybody labeled on the farm, it would have been a pretty big deal to go see the Cubs and White Sox play and stay in a hotel, color television. That was a lot of fun too. Well, I went out and I climbed up on the fence as we were loading the cattle in, and I had my cowboy boots, my Wranglers on, and my dad yells at me, "Get off the fence. You're scaring the cattle. You're too close to the chute." So I immediately jumped off and landed on the ground. And fortunately, I landed on a board with a great big rusty nail sticking out of it that went through the bottom of my shoe and out through the top. I could see it protruding out through the top of my shoe. And all these things went through my mind in a split second. One, holy crap, I got a nail in my foot. Two, I can't let my dad know I'm hurt. And three, if I do, I won't get to see the Cubs and White Sox play. So I was pulling my foot off. I was prying it off. And I remember to this day what that felt like. And I ran to the house limping. Mom says, "What are you limping for?" And I said, "I stubbed my toe, put my jammies on, got my blankie, and got in the back of the car and did not move until we were to the Mississippi River and I had to take a potty break." Well, guess what? My foot was all swollen. And my mom and dad felt bad for me. I had to go to the ER and get a tetanus shot. But I got to see the Cubs and White Sox play. So I sucked it up. That stuck with me for the rest of my life, I think. Well, moving on from that, I don't know if this injury caused it or not when I had the head injury in second grade, but I could spell and win all the spelling bee contests, but I couldn't read. And so I was a struggling student all the time. In fact, to be honest with you, my academic career is pretty interesting. I hated school. The only thing I liked was sports and relationship development. I think I was ahead of my time. I just wanted chicks to dig me. And that's kind of the way I went. I graduated 10th in my class out of high school. Okay, out of 23, but it's still the top half. It wasn't the bottom half. And then, of course, when Mrs. DeVetti in 7th grade, my teacher, smoked cigarettes all the time. She wanted to hold me back. She wanted to flunk me. That's how bad it was for me. I just hated school, and I just struggled the whole time. And so I must be stupid, right? I had my older brother. He was a better student than I. But the state came in and gave us IQ tests, and they said, "You know what? I'm afraid your boys are barely average. They'll never go to college or anything or amount to much." And of course, that was a big deal back then. My mom and dad both were in college, and my dad graduated. And he was a baseball player in college and basketball player. So anyway, when I heard that, since I didn't get grades, I believed it and gave sanction to it. Stupid is, stupid does. However, my brother was different. My brother got A's and B's in high school. And he says, "Wait a minute, you're telling me I'm stupid, but I'm not stupid because I have A's and B's." So he got his bachelor's degree in pre-med. He got his master's degree in anatomy, his PhD in neurophysiology, and his MD degree. He was a cardiologist and president of the American Heart Association when he grew up. But then there was me. There's this thing that I call CRI, CRI syndrome. And you won't find it anywhere because it's coming right out of this right here. And it stands for craniorectal inversion. In other words, I have my head up my rear. And that happens to a lot of us. And sometimes it stays there, sometimes it doesn't, but we hopefully can overcome that. And so I went to college anyway, and I joined a fraternity that was known for their academics. And I single-handedly changed their image in the first year by flunking out because I had no interest. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know whether I had no clue what I wanted to do, but I certainly wasn't ready for college. So I got a job as a 240-pound janitor in an electric power plant. And I was married in my first marriage. I think I was 20. And so you might say, well, what turned you to head in a different direction? Well, it's always something for some of us. First of all, there are several things that mold and sculpture who we are as we grow. One is the gifts we've been given us, each of us. It takes a while to identify them and then be able to put them to a passion or a vision and to good use. And so with that in mind, I started to think about there's something better I can do with my life than this. There's got to be something better. And it was a Vietnam War was going on. And so what really changed me, I think, was the day before I was inducted into the Army and sent to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I buried my best friend who was blown away in Vietnam. He told me the year before he wasn't coming back, and he didn't. And I carried him, put his casket in the grave, and then left for the Army. I started growing up. My CRI syndrome went away pretty fast. Well, truth be told, I ended up getting booted out of the Army because I had a high blood pressure and I didn't know it, and sent home. And from that point in time, I said, it's time to go back to school. And there was this one thing called athletic training that I was a little bit interested in, but it still was that studying stuff, and you got to learn all the anatomy, and it's not going to be easy. So I went back to school. I taught myself a new way to study, and it wasn't reading books. It was taking good notes, going to class and being accountable to that, and then rewriting my notes and taking the tests. And when I went back to school, I went straight through. I remember going winter, spring, fall, winter, spring, summer, and then I went to graduate school. Now, once I got my degree, and I also had a degree in teaching, and so I could have taught high school. Actually ended up doing that several years later. But I thought, okay, I want to be a Division I athletic trainer. That's my dream. That was my passion. So one day, I get a call. I had several opportunities to go in different places to go to grad school. And I got a call from Marshall University in West Virginia. And they offered me an opportunity to come out there and be an assistant athletic trainer and get my master's degree and get a job as a Division I trainer. So I thought that's pretty exciting. My wife and I at the time, we drove out there and looked the place over, decided to take it. She was guaranteed a job, which was a big factor because we needed the income. And I started grad school. And I never forget, there's this one kid, guy, I guess, who was trying to get his master's. And he came in, this is during double days, my first few months there. And he came in and says, you don't plan on getting your master's degree here, do you? Well, I guess that's why I came here. I mean, why wouldn't I? And he says, well, because there's this lady that hates men, and she's flunked half the graduate men out in the first year that she was there. The class was called Test and Measurements. That's math stuff, and I'm good at math except for the adding and subtracting. And so I was pretty uncomfortable about that, how that was going to turn out. But I was there, so I had to. I mean, I had to make the best of it. The thing that kept me going, though, was the athletes and the coaches, because now I was treated more like a staff member, and I felt a little respect, and I felt like I was a little bit more a part of it. And that was great. That was awesome. These guys were great. The players were great. I was pretty comfortable in that environment. And the night class that I took was on a Monday night, and it was 2.5 hours. See, I worked from 8 to 6. At 6:15, I had my BLT and cherry Coke at the Student Union for $1.50. And then I went to night class from 6:30 to 9. And on every Monday on Monday night, I'd always call mom and dad back in Iowa on the farm and let them know what was going on the previous week, this week, and so on. Well, so it so happens that November 9th, on a Monday, it was a nice fall day. Sun was out, and it was a little bit brisk, but it was still nice. And I went to football practice, and I went to night class, and the teacher assigned us a very difficult assignment to be done for the following week. And I thought, well, I got to get through this class. I mean, I have to, because, I mean, she has that reputation, so I have to get through it. Well, so I thought I can get it done. the trip that we were going on that week was the only airplane trip of the year. I'd been on the rest, but I was going on this one. But I had to get this class done too. I didn't say anything. Well, there was a student trainer. It was a senior at Marshall, and he had never been on an airplane before. And he wanted to go so badly because he was from poverty-stricken coal mining towns of southern West Virginia. And he wanted to go so bad. And I felt guilty a little bit, that I'm going. And I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday when I said, I got to get this thing done. And I'm not going to get it done if I go on this trip. So I told the kid he can go in my place. The kid's name was Don Tackett. And he was so excited. And I figured, well, look, I'm going to be traveling basketball. So, I'm going to get plenty of travel in. I don't have to go on this trip. November 9th, 1970. And that was a Monday. I called my folks that night, told them I was going on the trip. And, we're playing East Carolina. And Friday comes and my boss, Jim, he was 29 years old. He was engaged to a beautiful gal in Cincinnati, 3.5 hours from Huntington. So he asked me, since this was a charter flight, that it would come back and land at 7:45 on Saturday night. He would get in the car and head to Cincinnati. I would cover practice for him on Sunday. So here's the scene. I'm in the office on Saturday listening to the game. It's cold, nasty, and raining outside. And we lose 17-14. I'm listening to it on the radio, and then I'm doing my project and so on and so forth. So I get up, and I go out the door, and as I look on his desk, all that's on his desk is a little 5x7 piece of paper that says, to Mark, injuries from Saturday's game, no practice Sunday. And I thought, wow, that thing's going to be full tomorrow. So went home. We went out to eat with some friends. We were at student housing. And at 7:45, a bulletin comes across the TV, a national emergency bulletin. It says a DC-9 jet is down at Tri-State Airport. That's our airport, and that's our team. So I panicked a little bit, and I jumped in the car, and it was raining. I got to get to the airport and help or whatever. And then we were directed to go to the hospital, and he couldn't get to the airport. It was all blocked off. And so it said it was down, right? So I thought, well, we'll be all right. There'll be somebody hurt or something. I mean, we'll get through this. So I went to the hospital, and as I walked down through the emergency room of the hospital, I always remember people running around like you see on Grey's Anatomy, getting ready for the emergency room, doing all these things. And I just remember everybody scrambling, barking orders. And I was pointed to a conference room. And as I opened a big double door, I stepped down into the conference room, and there were about 40 people in there, all like me, waiting to hear what's going on, where's my parents, my son, whatever, my friends. And so we're all standing there huddled up. About 45 minutes later, the double doors open up, and there are two West Virginia State Police. They're dressed in yellow rain gear with the hats, and the lights shining from the back of them. And so you can see them, the water dripping off of them. And in between them was our school priest and one physician who didn't go. And so I thought they're going to make an announcement. Well, they didn't. They just pointed over in the corner to me and said, come here. We need to have you come with us. So I walked out and walked down the hall. And as we walked down that hall, back through the emergency room in which I came, everything was quiet. Everybody was leaning with their heads down, their arms folded, leaning against their gurneys. There was no motion left in there. There was nothing to wait for because the doctor said to me, everyone's been killed. We need to have you come help identify the bodies. And my life changed forever. I was 23 years old, and I was asked to be a first responder in the worst sports disaster in American history to this day. 75 lives were claimed. We had 5 physicians on that plane, one of them and their wives, 5 physicians and their wives. And one of them left 6 children, 12 and under orphan. That was our head team physician. People lost parents, people lost loved ones, they lost kids. It was apocalyptic, is what it was. So I went to the airport, And I thought we were going to go to the main terminal, but no, it wasn't the main terminal. It was a little bit farther down, and it was a National Guard armory. And the National Guard just happened to be on duty that weekend. And so we went into this great big huge army. It was like a hangar armory. It was like a hangar. In fact, they had small planes that would fit in there, but it of course didn't have any planes. And all these, so we didn't have computers, but we had typewriters and clipboards and boxes, and it was set up around the whole perimeter of this huge armory. And they took these white sheets, well, it looked like sheets that are all connected, and put them parallel down the whole length, probably 15 yards apart. And I thought, what are they doing that for? And then this great big door opens, the hangar, and in backs this truck. It was a National Guard Army truck, and the steam was rolling out of it. It was just totally coming out. I thought it's like somebody had a radiator blow or something. For an instant, that's what I thought, until all of a sudden I smelled burnt flesh. I smelled jet fuel and oil. And they started unloading the body bags and setting them on the white sheets down the length on both sides. And the steam from a 3,500 degree fire was still coming out of the bags. And so I was assigned somebody to start identifying bodies. And, one of the things that happens to us, I know this happens to firefighters and personnel and even in war, that I know that what happens to our brains in a situation like that, you go into what's called psychic numbing. Your body protects you. And in my case, as soon as the doctor told me everyone's been killed and we had to go to the airport, I remember him. I remember all of a sudden, I wasn't crying. I wasn't freaking out. I was very hypersensitive. I was acutely aware of what was going on. I was shaky, but I could function. And you just almost become a robot and you go through the motions. So I was assigned to this guy to go and start identifying bodies. And I'm not going to go into great detail about that, but I can tell you that it was very ugly. And it's something you'll never, ever forget. Those images stay with me every day for 50 years. And so it was a very tough time. And I ended up realizing about 2 a.m. that I forgot to call my mom and dad. And they're sitting there at home in Iowa waiting for the university to call them, tell them, hey, guess what? Your son was on the plane. And we'll try to find his body and get it back to you, whatever. That's what they're waiting for. But I finally got a line out, and it was me. I was a very short and a very emotional phone call. You know what I wanted to do? I wanted to hug my mom and dad. I really did. I needed a hug. I was trying to be tough. Dad told me to be tough, but this was tough. This was beyond tough. I told him I was okay, but I had to go back and start continuing to identify bodies. And that was a thing that I'll never ever forget. And the emotions coming from the other end of the phone without any voice, you could feel it, you could sense it. And so I had to go back to the gym. This is 3 a.m. to get the medical records of our athletes and bring them back out to help in the identification process. We didn't have DNA back then. So it was a 12-step thing that they used that was all visual and boiling bones to determine age. And, it was really crazy. There were people with no arms, legs, heads. There were arms and legs and feet and rings melted to fingers and in different bags. It was crazy, just nuts. I went back to the gym, got the stuff, and I stopped just for a second while this trooper was waiting for me to put the stuff in the boxes. And I looked at my desk where I just was a few hours ago when my life was, quote, normal. And I looked at Jim's desk and I saw that note. It didn't have any names on it. I guess it wouldn't. Never did. But there was no practice Sunday. Went back to the airport and continued the process for a couple of days without sleep. I was at Paul Barrett 14 funerals. And I was on the first flight with the basketball team 6 weeks later with the plane still lying at the bottom of the mountain, with steam still coming out of it as if it was still on fire. And at that point in time, I didn't care whether we crashed or not. I didn't care about anything. I had nothing. There was nothing right here in this heart. nothing. And that lasted a long, long time. But I had to drop half my classes and become the acting head trainer. And then in the springtime, they brought in a new football coach and AD, and that was a memorable experience. The kid that went in my place, buried him. We had to carry, he was from a little teeny, small coal mining town. His dad had black lung disease. We carried his casket 150 yards upside the mountain in the rain, in the mud. And they had cut branches and laid across the grave they had just dug for him. And the shovel was still sticking in the dirt where they dug the grave. And these two guys were sitting there. They had beards, roll your own cigarettes, and shotguns leaning up against their shoulder. Obviously, we knew we weren't wanted there. And I surely wanted to get out of there. But we buried him up there. And, another experience. And his dad looked at me. I met his dad, and I could feel the anger, the frustration. He lost his son, and I was the one that's supposed to be on the plane. So I had a little survivor's guilt, didn't I? Well, we ended up going from there to back to Huntington, and I got involved with basketball and dropped half my classes. And in the springtime, when they brought in the new AD, I'm sorry, I forgot to say that, and the coach, the new AD said, we appreciate what you've done here, but cleaning house, we're starting over. We don't want anybody associated with what happened here. We want to start fresh and move forward. You can get your master's degree, but you're too young to be an athletic trainer at this level. And I looked at him and I said, I'm old enough to identify bodies. Well, it didn't matter. So be it. I stayed on another year, got my master's, and got out of there and wanted to get as far away from there as I could. I wanted to get as far away from Huntington and never go back. So that was a pretty traumatic experience for me. And yet, we all suffer tragedy. I became extremely obsessed with achieving. Kind of like a push back like my brother did with the grades, and I'll prove to you I'm smart. And so I wanted to prove to somebody, actually I was proving to myself, that I was worthy of being an athletic trainer at Division I at some point in time in my career. I got a job in Seattle. That's a long ways away. And we moved out here in 72. And I was part of a research project through the University of Washington as a research athletic trainer. It was a paid position. And I also, part of that was to be out in high schools, gathering data on injuries and serving as an athletic trainer for that school, which was Interlake High School in Bellevue. And that was a tremendous experience, but I still wanted to be a college athletic trainer. Well, I finally got that opportunity. After that project was over, I went to the University of Idaho as head athletic trainer for 3 years, and then on to Washington State, where I was the director of athletic management / head athletic trainer for 21 years. And I got my job as being a Division I, and I thought, I'm on my way now. But there were certain things that weren't right, and I started having PTSD. I started having flashbacks. These flashbacks occurred when I was awake, not when I was sleeping. And the flashbacks were like, whenever I barbecue chicken, I see bodies marinating in jet fuel and oil on the grill. When I open stab a baked potato on the grill to see if it's done, the steam rolls out. It's a green body bag with 3,500 degree fire. And I really started having some problems. Every time that there was a tragedy, let's talk about that a little bit, tragedy. I finally did get some help from PTSD. It was quite a journey. I hadn't cried in 30 years. Post-traumatic stress disorder. It's not really post, because you see, everything stays in your short-term memory as if it happened yesterday. It never gets transferred to your long-term memory. It never gets dulled. And so it stays right there. And that's why it's so vivid. And that's why so many people have problems with it, either through nightmares or through flashbacks or whatever. That makes it pretty tough. It was getting worse. And so long story short, we don't have enough time to go into that, but long story short, basically, I'd probably tell you that I did get the help I needed and cried for the first time in 30 years. And in 2002, we went back to Marshall University in West Virginia, my wife and I, where they were inducting me into their Sports Medicine Hall of Fame as a charter member, along with those who perished and all the medical professionals. And it was a cathartic experience. It was unbelievable. I was treated so much differently, so much better. And it was very healing, extremely healing. So that was a great thing. But you know what? We all have tragedies in our life. You're going through a tragedy now. I mean, you get up in the morning, you can't go and be with your friends. You can't go and play sports. You're going nuts. And I understand that. This, in a sense, is a tragedy because what molds and sculptures you are relationships. The most important thing in this earth are relationships and the development of those relationships. You want to be around people who are loving, caring, supportive, uplifting, and you avoid those who are not. And you might say, well, I know, but I got relatives or, mom and dad. I don't mind have anybody that always putting me down, always, beating me up, putting me down. And you don't need that. Some people need to be loved from a distance. So what do? We try to search out things that we are attracted to. And those things that we're attracted to are people who are loving, caring, supportive, uplifting. And that's what you want to do. That's where you get your circle of influence from. There's another thing too, the gifts you've been given you. The gifts that have been given you, you will develop, you will identify what they are. Some people are designed to be mechanical engineers. Some people are designed to be doctors. Some people are designed to be artists, singers, whatever. You've been given gifts. Just find them. And then trying to find a passion to identify them and put them to. It's not much fun right now for you. Actually, it's not much fun for me either. I don't want to wear this doggone mask. I get sick of it. But I'm vulnerable because of my age. And I'm COVID-free today at this point, I think. I hope. But, you're out there. You're a lot more active than I am. And, you're struggling right now. I understand that. Well, I could tell you this. We didn't have the social media when I was a little kid growing up. And by the time I was 12, I was riding a tractor in the back 40, pulling a plow around 12 hours a day. Not every day, on Saturdays. And I remember, you'll love this. Picture this, will you? I had a great big White House cigar. It seemed like I had a baseball bat sticking out of my mouth smoking because the cigar was almost bigger than me. I'm sitting on a tractor, 12 years old. I can't even touch the floorboard of the tractor. And I got a big stogie sticking out of my mouth because I was bored. You didn't have any media. You just had the drone of the tractor. And I thought, well, that's kind of like it is for these kids today. You're not on a tractor, but you have social media. That helps. That makes a big difference. But it's still going to mold and sculpture. So the other thing that molds and sculptures us as to who we become are circumstances. And it's not what happens to us in life, it's how we react to it. Some of us have to overcome constantly. Tragedy doesn't have to be about my plane crash. It just happens to be my mantra. It's a part of who I am. It's a part of my journey. I have to accept accountability for it. But that doesn't mean you get out of tragedy, period. Let me ask you, how many have flunked out of school? Well, we haven't yet. How many of you have ever lost a job and fired? How many of you have ever been a janitor, ran a backhoe? I ran a backhoe for 8 years going to college. How many of you have ever lost your home? How many of you ever had to deal with cancer, paralysis? How many of you have ever had to deal with divorce? Well, you haven't yet, of course, but some of you will. I did. Unfortunately, my kids both have. That doesn't mean it's automatic. It doesn't have to be, but and hopefully it's not, but it does happen. So everything that I just mentioned to you, it's happened to me, and I'm still here. See, you don't get this big tragedy with 75 people killed that you know every single one of them, and you've had to look at what's left of them, if there is anything left of them. You don't get a little thing, certificate says, no more tragedy for you. You've filled, your requirements. It didn't work that way. I lost a player in my arms 7 years later on the football field in the first 20 minutes of practice. Worked our rear end off trying to get him going. Ironically, the next year, we had another kid collapse. He was clinically dead 30 minutes. We did manual mouth-to-mouth and CPR in him, and he walked out 2 weeks later from the hospital with no brain damage. But there's lots of tragedy. I've dealt with a pipe bomb that killed a kid and one of our players. And in the aftermath of that, I mean, all kinds of stuff. My brother died when he was 63 after a 3-mile run of a massive heart attack. The next day, Jackie's mom died, my wife. The following week, another close loved one, friend of ours, passed away. We had three in 1 week. And so tragedies just don't go away like that. And it's a tragedy if you can say, oh, I haven't had anything like you. I lost a pet once. I've lost a pet before. I watched my little puppy when I was 6 years old get run over right in front of me on a gravel road. Picked him up, carried him to the house. He fell out of my arms because he was so loose. That sucked. And I was crying. Dad got shoveled and we went and buried him. And so I've had a lot. Death's been my mantra, unfortunately. It doesn't have to be yours. But it has seemed to what's driven me to be who I am. It's part of me. And they always say that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Well, except for bears. Bears will kill you. So don't forget that. So what can I do for you today? How can I help you? I want to talk to you about your own tragedies. I want to put this into perspective a little bit for you. I want you to think of yourself as a lot of different parts, from gifts to relationships to circumstances, all those things. And they become you. You become who all that is, whatever it is. And that's who you become. So if you are suffering tragedy, losing a dog, a pet, a loved one, a boyfriend, girlfriend, it doesn't really matter. It becomes a part of you. It affects your soul. And you have to figure out a way to transcend from it, to move on. Life's not so much about what you achieve as much as it is about what you overcome. Success can be measured in two different modes. And I've had a little bit of both, a lot of both, actually. As I look back on my life growing up on the farm, it wasn't fun then, but it sure has a great memory of how it made me. I savor it. Not very many people have that kind of upbringing anymore. It's so much different in this world now. But what I want you to do is I want you to think there's all these parts who you are, and your parts are stored in the kitchen. And the kitchen has all these drawers in it, and the drawers are filled with your relationships, your circumstances, your teacher, you're a student, you're a player, athlete, all these things. They are all parts of who you are. But when it comes to tragedy, or even something really powerful that's great, not any one of these should dominate who you are. So let's take tragedy. Let's take the tragedy of the COVID virus that you're sitting around staring at the walls with every day. Take it out of the cupboard and you hold it in your hand and you focus on it and you grieve over it and cry over it or do whatever. And you put it back in the cupboard until it's time to bring it out again. And you do that because you see, grief or whatever we have from a plane crash or from whatever it is, the grief that we experience never goes away. It changes in form. And it's not a lack of faith or a sign of weakness. It's really the price we pay for love. Grief is found in the eyes, in the crook of our eyes, the corner. It's found in the pit of our stomach, the hole in our heart. It's basically love looking for a place to go. That's pretty much what it is. And we don't all have the resources to grieve properly. The only way we can grieve, to be honest, is to have someone to hold us up so we can let down and let go and move on from there. So I guess one of the things I want to say to you today is have courage. Hang on to that rocking horse or that big, you feel like you're on a bucking bull or a bucking horse and you're just trying to hang on for dear life. It will get better. You will, if you want it to, because a lot of this is that you wrote the script. You're the author. If you don't like it, you had to change the script. But only you have control of that. And you got to have a passion. You got to have a vision. And the other thing is the truth. How many of you have ever had a coach, teacher, parent, someone that is, quote, above you, How many of you have ever had somebody tell you you're not worthy, you can't do this, you're dumb, you're stupid, whatever, beat you down? That can have a very, very bad effect on you. And just like me and my brother, the thing about it is that did you know that 90% of knowledge is belief? And belief's what someone told you or something that you read. It doesn't have to be based on scientific fact. Like putting your hand on a hot stove, you have evidence that burns, you're not going to do it again. But belief is so much different. So there's a huge margin of error. So I'm going to ask you right now, don't you ever have someone tell you that you are not capable and you can't accomplish something. Don't ever let them. You're talking to college flunk out here. You're talking to somebody who went on and got degrees and was successful. And I couldn't have even thought or imagined that my life would turn out the way it has from when I was a kid. I mean, it's just so far bizarre, different. It's crazy. Spent 32 years in college athletics. I've taken care of a whole lot of athletes and people over the years. And I savor those because those are about relationships. I miss my players, love my players. They were my players. I owned them. At least I so thought I did because I was so passionate about making sure they were taken care of properly. And I think that Marshall had a huge effect on that, the importance of everyone else above me. And yet I was able to accomplish things. I was the president of a national organization for 4 years of 50,000 members, that was a wild thing too. There's so much more stories I could tell about that. But for the most part, I'm going to leave you with creating your own truth today. And how are you going to do that? There's this guy named Cliff Young, and he was 61 years old. He was a rancher in Australia. And he wore bib overalls and galoshes. One day, a truck goes by, he sees a magazine, he says, the world's longest foot race is going to be held in town near him. He decides he's going to enter it, not knowing anything about nothing. So he shows up with the top runners in the world, and he's in line registering. Here's a skinny little dudes and dudettes, with their running gear on, all ready to go, hyper crazy. And it's a 500-mile race. It's like an 8-day race, foot race. And so this guy comes up to Cliff and says, what are you doing? He said, I'm going to enter a race. Where's your gear? I'm wearing it. He was wearing his galoshes and his boots. You're going to run in that? Yep. Okay, what have you done to train? Well, I live on a station ranch. I don't have any way and we don't have any horses, so I have to run after my cows to chase them. So that's pretty much how I got in shape. Well, anybody who's played sports and run, especially running, knows that this is pretty ridiculous and funny. So anyway, race starts. Long story short, the race is over, and Cliff, the 61 rancher station in Australia, wins the race. Matter of fact, he breaks the world record by a day and a half. You know why? He didn't know the truth. See, the truth was, according to the top runners and the top exercise physiologists in the world, the rule was that you had to run for 18 hours and sleep for 6. Nobody told Cliff that. He kept running. He created his own truth. Why don't you go out and create your own truth? You hang in there. Thanks for listening.
They just came and went. And today dealt me another hand of heartaches that I'll play. What we said and what we meant.